Two brothers from Kansas built a $120 billion empire so quietly that most Americans have never heard their names. Charles and David Koch didn't just create one of the largest private companies in the world. They rewrote the rules of American politics from the shadows. But here's what's truly shocking. Their father, Fred Koch, made his fortune by building oil refineries for Joseph Stalin in Soviet Russia. From those controversial beginnings, the Koch brothers went on to fund the Tea Party movement, reshape conservative politics, and influence elections with a network so vast it rivals the Republican Party itself. This is the story of America's most powerful political dynasty that you've probably never heard of. But to understand how they became America's shadow rulers, we need to start with a scandal that almost destroyed the family before it even began. Picture this. It's 1929, and a young American engineer named Fred Koch is standing in the frozen wasteland of Soviet Russia, watching workers build what would become one of Stalin's most important oil refineries. The same Stalin who would go on to kill millions of his own people. And Fred Koch? He's getting paid handsomely to make it all possible. Here's what's absolutely insane about this story. While America was entering the Great Depression and millions were losing their jobs, Fred Koch was making a fortune helping build the Soviet Union's industrial backbone. Between 1929 and 1932, Koch's company built 15 major oil refineries for Stalin's regime. That's more than $200 million in today's money flowing directly into Fred Koch's pockets. But here's where it gets really dark. Fred Koch wasn't just building refineries. He was training Soviet engineers, sharing American technology, and essentially helping create the industrial machine that would later threaten America during the Cold War. The oil from those refineries would fuel Soviet tanks, Soviet planes, and Soviet ships for decades to come. When Fred Koch returned to America in 1932, he brought back more than just money. He brought back a deep, burning hatred of communism that would shape his family's political views for generations. But there's a twisted irony here that most people miss. The Koch family fortune, the very foundation of their political empire, was built on communist money. Fast forward to 1967. Fred Koch dies, leaving behind 4 sons and a company worth about $70 million. You'd think the brothers would work together to build on their father's success. Instead, they spent the next 15 years trying to destroy each other. Charles Koch, the second oldest, took control of the company. He was brilliant, ruthless, and had a vision that went far beyond oil refining. But his younger brothers, Frederick and Bill Koch, had other ideas. They wanted to cash out, sell the company, and live like European aristocrats. The battle that followed was so vicious, it makes Game of Thrones look like a family picnic. Bill Koch hired private investigators to spy on Charles. Frederick Koch tried to have Charles declared mentally incompetent. Charles fought back by buying out his brother's shares, but the lawsuits continued for decades. Here's the crazy part. While the Koch brothers were spending millions trying to destroy each other in court, Charles and David were quietly building one of the most powerful political networks in American history. The family civil war wasn't just about money. It was about control of an empire that would reshape American politics. In 1980, David Koch did something that shocked the political establishment. He ran for vice president on the Libertarian Party ticket, promising to eliminate the FBI, the CIA, Social Security, and Medicare. Their platform was so radical, it made Barry Goldwater look like a moderate. They got less than 1% of the vote, but David Koch learned something crucial that night. Americans weren't ready for a libertarian revolution yet. But what if you could change their minds without them even knowing it? That's when Charles Koch had his breakthrough moment. Instead of running candidates, why not fund the ideas? Instead of building a political party, why not build a network of think tanks, universities, and advocacy groups that would slowly shift American political thinking to the right? It was genius, And it was completely legal. While other billionaires were buying yachts and sports teams, the Koch brothers were buying something far more valuable: the marketplace of ideas. By 1990, the Koch political network was already massive, but most Americans had no idea it existed. They were funding the Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation, and dozens of smaller think tanks. They were giving millions to universities like George Mason and Florida State to create economics programs that taught free market principles. But here's what made their strategy so brilliant: they never put their name on anything. While other wealthy families built monuments to themselves, the Kochs built an invisible empire. The ideas coming out of these institutions looked independent, academic, and objective. In reality, they were all connected to a single source of funding. Take the climate change debate, for example. In the 1990s, there was growing scientific consensus that human activity was warming the planet. The Koch brothers, whose fortune depended on fossil fuels, had a problem. So they did what they always did. They bought a solution. They funded scientists who questioned climate change, think tanks that published skeptical research, and advocacy groups that lobbied against environmental regulations. They didn't need to convince everyone that climate change was fake. They just needed to create enough doubt to prevent action. And it worked. For decades, America lagged behind other developed countries in addressing climate change, partly because of the confusion created by Koch-funded organizations. But the Koch brothers' masterpiece came in 2009, during the financial crisis. Americans were angry at Wall Street, angry at government bailouts, and looking for someone to blame. The Kochs saw an opportunity. They didn't create the Tea Party, that started as a genuine grassroots movement, but they hijacked it. Through their network of organizations like Americans for Prosperity and Freedom Works, they provided funding, training, and coordination for Tea Party groups across the country. Here's what's so clever about this. The Tea Party looked like a spontaneous uprising of ordinary Americans. In reality, it was being orchestrated by billionaires who wanted to cut their own taxes and eliminate regulations on their businesses. The results were spectacular. In the 2010 midterm elections, Tea Party candidates won 60 House seats and 5 Senate seats. Suddenly, the Republican Party was being pulled sharply to the right by politicians who owed their careers to Koch funding. But the Kochs weren't done. They had discovered something that would change American politics forever: dark money. Here's where the Koch story gets really scary. In 2010, the Supreme Court ruled in Citizens United that corporations could spend unlimited amounts on political campaigns, but there was a loophole that the Kochs exploited better than anyone else. Instead of donating directly to campaigns, which would require disclosure, they created a network of nonprofit organizations that could accept unlimited donations and keep their donors secret. It was like a political money laundering operation, completely legal, but totally hidden from public view. The numbers are staggering. Between 2010 and 2016, the Koch network spent over $400 million on federal elections alone. That's more than the Republican National Committee spent during the same period. They weren't just influencing elections, they were running a shadow political party. But here's what makes this even more insane. They were spending this money to elect politicians who would cut their taxes and eliminate regulations on their businesses. Every dollar they spent on politics saved them millions in taxes and regulatory costs. It was the best investment they ever made. Then came 2016, and everything changed. Donald Trump won the Republican nomination, and the Koch brothers faced their biggest crisis since the family civil war of the 1980s. Trump represented everything they opposed: protectionism, big government spending, and populist rhetoric that appealed to working-class voters. The Kochs had spent decades building a sophisticated intellectual conservative movement, and Trump was threatening to tear it all down with Twitter rants and rally speeches. So they did something unprecedented. They refused to support the Republican nominee for president. While other major donors fell in line behind Trump, the Koch network sat out the 2016 election. It was a massive gamble that backfired spectacularly. Trump won anyway, and suddenly the Koch brothers found themselves on the outside of a Republican Party they had helped create. The politicians they had funded for years were now taking orders from Trump, not from them. But the Kochs adapted, because that's what they always do. They couldn't control Trump, so they focused on what they could control: state governments, federal agencies, and the courts. While everyone was focused on Trump's tweets, the Koch network was quietly reshaping the American legal system. Through the Federalist Society, which they had been funding for decades, they provided lists of conservative judges for Trump to nominate. The results speak for themselves. Trump appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, all of them Federalist Society members. He appointed over 200 federal judges, most of them recommended by Koch-funded organizations. In just 4 years, they managed to shift the federal judiciary to the right for a generation. But that's not even the most impressive part. At the state level, the Koch network was funding organizations like the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, which writes model legislation for state lawmakers. These bills, covering everything from voting rights to environmental regulations, have been passed in dozens of states, often word for word. It's like having a shadow legislature that operates in all 50 states simultaneously. And most Americans have no idea it exists. In 2019, David Koch died of prostate cancer, ending one of the most powerful political partnerships in American history. But his death didn't slow down the network. If anything, it accelerated. Charles Koch, now in his late 80s, has been preparing for succession by bringing in professional managers and expanding the network's focus beyond politics. They're now funding criminal justice reform, immigration reform, and even some Democratic candidates who support their economic agenda. It's a remarkable evolution for a network that started as a libertarian experiment and became a conservative juggernaut. But the core mission remains the same: use money and organization to shape American politics in ways that benefit the Koch business empire. Today, Koch Industries is the second largest private company in America, with annual revenues of $125 billion. That's bigger than Goldman Sachs, bigger than Boeing, bigger than most countries' entire economies. They own oil refineries, chemical plants, paper mills, cattle ranches, and even the technology that makes your smartphone screen. But their political network might be even more valuable than their business empire. The Koch network now includes over 700 donor families, raises over $400 million per election cycle, and employs thousands of political operatives across the country. They've created something that has never existed before in American politics: a permanent, professional, ideologically driven political organization that operates independently of any political party. It's like having a private AUK. Here's what's truly frightening about the Koch story. They've proven that in America, if you have enough money and patience, you can literally buy political change. They've spent 40 years and billions of dollars reshaping American politics, and it's worked. Climate action has been delayed for decades. Taxes on the wealthy have been cut repeatedly. Regulations on businesses have been eliminated. Labor unions have been weakened. Voting rights have been restricted. All of these changes benefit the Koch business empire, and all of them were achieved through their political network. The scariest part? Most Americans still don't know who the Koch brothers are or how much influence they have over their daily lives. The policies that affect your taxes, your health care, your environment, and your voting rights have all been shaped by 2 brothers from Kansas who decided that democracy was something you could purchase. Charles Koch is now 88 years old, but his network will outlive him. He's created a political machine that can operate for generations, funded by hundreds of wealthy families who share his vision of minimal government and maximum corporate freedom. The Koch dynasty didn't just build a business empire. They built a shadow democracy that operates parallel to the official one. And unlike elected officials, the Koch network never has to face voters or explain their actions to the public. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.